Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the WTM Travel Innovation Summit in association with Travel Technology Initiative. My name is Paul Richer, representing TTI, and I'm your chairperson, your moderator for the afternoon. I've put the event together. The first thing I'd like to say is just thank you very much to Sabre Travel Network, and thank you to Travel Zoo for sponsoring this event. Without them, I'm not sure we could hold it, so that's great. And then let me tell you a bit about what we're going to be doing for the next couple of hours. I've organized the afternoon, so we have 6 speakers, some of who are here, some I hope will turn up later if I'm lucky. And we're going to hear from them 2 by 2. We're going to hear 2 presentations, then I'll invite the speakers to actually take questions from us, and then I'll invite the next 2 speakers along, so that's how the afternoon will run. And at 5 o'clock, we'll all run up to the other end of the building, to the other hall, where Illusions are going to be providing us with free drinks in the travel tech area. So we'll look forward to that. We'll deserve a drink by the end of the afternoon. Everybody happy about that? Any complaints? That's nice of you. Thank you very much. So we're starting with 2 keynote speeches from 2 people who are really, I suppose, at the forefront of innovation. The whole afternoon is about innovation, and we're going to hear 2 keynote speeches just covering that subject from 2 different perspectives. So let me just introduce our 2 speakers, and I'll introduce our first one to present. Nearest to me here is Joachim Everstein. He's Head of Innovations, EMEA, at Sabre Travel Network. And then next to him, furthest away from me, is John Straw. John is Chairman of Thomas Cook's Digital Advisory Board, and I think also, John, on your business card it says Entrepreneur in Residence as well, does it not? That's right. So 2 people are really at the forefront of innovation, and let's hear our first presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Joachim.
Thank you, Paul. So as Paul said, my name is Joachim Everstein, and I work as the innovation manager and also the technology evangelist for Sabre Travel Network in EMEA. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit of what we're doing in our team back in Dallas called Sabre Labs. So what does the future hold for us? Our labs team in Dallas has been experimenting with some emerging technologies that we believe will change and even possibly, or challenge, I'm afraid, or even change everything that we know about travel. Today, technology is really reaching the masses really, really fast. The technology adoption is happening more rapidly than ever before. And technology is very much cheaper than ever before. Even flying cars is not confined to a storybook or a science fiction movie. The latest and probably most advanced flying to date was launched last week, actually, by a company called Aeromobile, a little-known Slovakian startup. It can reach 124 miles an hour, and it can travel up to 430 miles or 4 hours of flight time. That's enough from here at World Travel Market in London to reach Aberdeen. So what's next? Well, not surprisingly, although the term is not new, big data continues to be the most confusing tech buzzword of the decade. It's also a bit ambiguous as to how companies will use big data, but it's important. A few years back, we created a big data team at Sabre to help us figure out. It's now one of the most exciting things we are working on, specifically how to unlock the power of data for us and our customers. I will now talk about 3 different technologies that we're watching and also 2 wildcards that could potentially change everything. Number 1, new levels of connectivity. Geolocation information has become one of the greatest things to come out of smartphones and mobile apps. When you're outdoors, the GPS in your phone is usually accurate within a few meters, and that accuracy has made way for amazing applications ranging from personal run trackers such as Runkeeper and crowdsourced traffic mapping like Waze. The next big focus is pinpointing your exact indoor location. GPS can often be off by a small amount, and while it can give you an indication of altitude, it has a harder time to determining what floor you're on, for example. And this stuff really needs to make a difference. Last year, our labs teams started testing different technologies to pinpoint indoor location. And we tried two different technologies. One is Wi-Fi, and the other ones are with something called iBeacons. iBeacons uses something called Bluetooth low energy, which is consuming very, very little energy, so it would actually not drain your mobile phone while in use. For our initial experiments, we joined a pilot program with an American company called AT&T to test their location services that use Wi-Fi to track indoor location. We ran several experiments in our offices and also in two different airports, in Dallas and in San Francisco. We subsequently experimented with the same thing, but using iBeacons instead, also for the purpose of pinpointing indoor location. This technology communicates with apps directly installed on your phone and will prompt the user as you come close to it for different actions. We found that both these technologies work well when determining proximity or zoning. For example, it can tell which gate you're at, but it can't really tell where you're sitting at the gate. We also found out that this kind of location testing can drive huge amounts of data, especially for travel. Why? Think about how fast you walk through an airport and how many gates you pass along the way. And if we accurately wanted to determine what gate you were at, we'd need to ping you and your application every 10 to 15 seconds. And now think about the volume of data created by pinging the location of every single traveler in the airport every 15 seconds. That would take a lot of storage and also a lot of smarts to turn that data into intelligent and useful information. So Sabre Labs took these learnings and created a working prototype to help showcase how this technology could be used in the very near future. This example is a dashboard designed with the airline in mind, with location information available for passengers that have the app installed and have opted in to be tracked by location services. Here you can see the last known location and time, as well as when the traveler passed by certain thresholds, security, for example. Technology number 2, and we talk about new levels of real customer data, real-time customer data. And don't be scared, this is really just a fancy term for photo sharing. Along with the sheer number of photos being shared, over 60 million a day effect on Instagram, what we are finding is that photo sharing is significantly more engaging than text. When I say engaging, I mean comments or likes or click-throughs. We've seen studies that shows that Instagram is 48 times more engaging than Twitter when it comes to brand mentioning and brand recognition. And Wired magazine found that when they use images on their tweets, their click-through rate on stories increased by about 125%. But with all these photos, often it's hard to extract meaning or sentiment from them. Traditionally, analyzing images has been a hard problem for computers, but there are signs that we are getting better at it as an industry. This is an example of a project that used computer vision to analyze selfies. Here you can filter selfies by region and then by gender, pose, and other features. For example, you can search for a selfie taken in New York City of a guy looking up with his head tilted to the left, his eyes open, and his mouth closed. So that's only an example of all the capabilities that this new technology can enable. Earlier this year, our labs group started exploring Instagram photos taken on hotel properties specifically. We gathered the photos taken and then manually tagged them for common nouns and adjectives. We aggregated results and created a visual vibe board to show what attributes people are saying about the property online. All of this is to equip a hotel or a property with information about what is being captured, said, and shared through photos on the internet. Number 3 of the technologies that we're watching, new devices. And when I say new devices, I talk about wearable devices. We have 3 different types. We have, first of all, the activity trackers, then we have the smartwatches, and the heads-up displays. Activity trackers are step counters and sleep trackers, like Fitbit or Jawbone. They are also the simplest of the wearables, and currently they are the most prevalent. We've seen reports of over 30 million devices shipped in 2013, and this is over half of all the total wearables shipped last year. Unfortunately, half of these devices are no longer used 6 months after purchase. Now, the technology may have something to do with it, but it's actually tracking closer to behavior around dieting and exercise than it does to technology. So the next one is smartwatches, and we have the coming release of the Apple Watch, we have the Samsung Gear, and the Pebble smartwatch, to name a few. Third one are the heads-up display, and now we're talking about Google Glass and the likes of that. These really get their name of, well, keeping your head up while looking at a display or looking into a display. The main benefit of wearables is that it's using something we call glanceable information that uses the pre-attentive capabilities of the brain, which means actually that you can glance at a smartwatch, get a message, and by doing so just for a couple of seconds, you can continue to do whatever you were doing before you glanced at your watch. That's pre-attentive capabilities. And it fits within your activity rather than the activity fitting in with your mobile device. So when we're talking about Google Glass, we wanted to take things a bit further and not just use the built-in capabilities and voice commands of the Google Glass device. So we decided to create our own application just to see what kind of applications you could do. So we built this prototype called Find a Flight that uses our newly launched APIs in Sabre Dev Studio. So when I wear the glass and I can say, okay, Glass, find a flight from DFW to the beach. And I will then get back the result of the lowest fare within the coming 180 days to destinations that we have deemed being beach destinations. This was a lot of fun, and it's been really enlightening for us and the Sabre Labs team to learn and think about what is possible through voice commands. Okay, so I mentioned before that I will talk a little bit about 2 wildcards that actually can change the way we think about travel. First one, virtual reality. Much of the newfound hype around virtual reality centers around one company, which is called Oculus VR, and their product, Oculus Rift. Much of the work in virtual reality up to this point has been around creating virtual experiences that feel real, creating new worlds and games that almost feel like real life. Now, what we're starting to see is more emphasis on the idea of experiencing real people, real places, but doing so virtually. I really love this quote by one of my colleagues that works for Sabre Labs, Tony Bryce. He has a blog on our website blog called Trends Tuesdays, and when he was talking about virtual reality, he said, "I'll someday be making the decision on where to go next based on the experience of having already been there virtually." The idea is not that virtual reality will replace travel, but could create a whole new arena of pre-travel. Imagine being able to know your way around Disney World before your first trip, or knowing the exact route from your hotel to the client meeting across town. The second one is something we refer to as multisensory interactions. And this is really to take virtual reality one step further. Multisensory interactions center around exploring and analyzing data through sound, touch, and other senses as a replacement or complement to data visualization. This is already happening, but in small steps. The Jawbone that I mentioned before, the activity tracker, actually has something called an idle alert that lets you know when you've been sitting down for 45 minutes or longer, and will actually tell you it's time to move around. And instead of sending a notification to your phone, it just vibrates on your wrist, and then you know it's time to move around on your chair or something. So last year, for an internal hack day, our labs team was really intrigued by the idea of something called data sonification, turning data into sound. So they took the departure data from a single day across 5 airports in the United States and turned this into sound. Every 8 minutes translated into one measure of music. The faster the tempo, the more departures, and the higher the pitch, the more late departures there were. And so you can imagine the idea of hearing things stacking up across the country before you even look up to see where the problems are. And while this is departure data, it might as well be applied to number of bookings or even number of in-policy bookings. It just might be the wild card that could change everything. And with that, I would like to thank you for listening to me, and I would also encourage you to find one of my colleagues in red polos that says Sabre and it says Reinvent Travel on the back, because they will be able to share with you some of the wearable technology that we're looking into right now and give you a demonstration. You can also try it on yourself. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Fascinating stuff. And I've got some questions for Joachim. I hope you have as well. Keep them in mind. And ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome John.
Thank you.
Take it back.
So, good afternoon. My name is John Straw. I'm chairman of Thomas Cook's Digital Advisory Board. I wear the loudest shirts in the travel business, other than the Hawaiian ones. I've been 20 years in the internet space. My background is I'm an entrepreneur, and I built and sold 3 businesses. I wanted to talk to you today about not innovation as a standalone subject, but innovation delivered, catalyzed by disruption. I've actually just finished writing a book called I Disrupted, which is actually literally just finished last week, which is actually talking about the way that our world has been disrupted and is continuing to be disrupted at an ever-increasing rate by technology. To do that, to set a scene for disruption, I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about something I call the chainsaw theorem. And the chainsaw theorem works like this. I have a house in the country. At the bottom of my garden, there are 3 or 4 dead trees, and I decide what I'd like to do one weekend is go take down those trees. So I go out to my local hardware store, I buy a chainsaw, and I take down said trees and put the chainsaw into my garden shed. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, that would have been the end of it. It would have been the equivalent of a man draw, and I wouldn't have seen it for the next 20 years. But What's happened now is with the recent advent of the Internet of Sharing is that I put the device into my garden shed, and then I put it on the internet to see if anybody wants to rent it for a low price. So the first thing that I've done is I've imperiled all of the chainsaw manufacturers that would want to sell on new chainsaws, because all of a sudden people can start to rent them from other people. So at that particular point, what then happens is a next-door neighbor, three or four places down the road, wants to do something similar. He actually wants to take some trees down. So what he does is, rather than going to his local hardware hire place, he actually comes and rents it on me because he sees it on the internet. And as a direct result of that, hire companies all of a sudden become greatly imperiled. But he actually enjoys the experience so much that he would like to take this up as a profession, so he becomes a professional tree surgeon. Unfortunately, by this particular point, all of the chainsaw manufacturers have gone bust and all the chainsaw renters haven't got kit anymore. So what he does is he downloads a schematic from the internet, he sends it to Amazon, who then three-dimensionally print him a new chainsaw. What then happens, unfortunately, he chops his knee off. Chops his kneecap off in the process of using his new chainsaw. But that's not a problem. He was going to go to the NHS to get it fixed, but unfortunately the NHS got a few problems with the Apple iWatch, and everybody's doing self-diagnosis and actually turning up to their doctor in their millions to actually ask whether or not they're dying. So what he does is he goes to his private doctor, and he turns around to him and says, "Not a problem, I have a copy of your stem cell profile." And what he does then is he then three-dimensionally prints a kneecap. In the process of doing so, he then injects the client with some nanobots who then stitch the kneecap to this particular guy, who then walks out the surgery 2 hours later with a brand new leg. All of this is completely feasible. All of this is not 3 or 4 years' time, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the stuff that you've been dining on, or this business has been dining on for the past 4 or 5 years. Everything that I have talked about so far is now. A couple of weeks ago, Amazon announced their three-dimensional printing bureau. Some Americans actually three-dimensionally printed a car, and the Chinese three-dimensionally printed a kneecap. All of this is here now. What Thomas Cook is doing is trying to innovate within the context of this level of disruption. Let me go back, however, and talk about our objectives. So we have 2 channels. We have our retail channel, 700 or so stores, and we have our web channel. The difference between the two, massively, is conversion rate. Would anybody like to take a guess at the conversion rate of our retail channel in terms of the number of people that sit down with an agent and make a booking? Any guesses? 43? 75? Thank you. You're the organizer. You're not supposed to be saying anything, Paul. Actually, it's about 50%. Which is a pretty damn good figure for a closing ratio. The website of it, you all know. The website is in the region of 1%. It's a massive difference between the two. The reasons is that retail store provides inspiration and the website provides efficiency. What we at Thomas Cook want to do is we want to innovate to get the best out of both of these. Let me go back a little bit. This is a piece of research produced by Google in 2013. Google, as I'm sure you're aware, are actually very active in the travel business. And they now believe that there are 5 stages to travel. The first part is the dreaming. You wake up in Croydon at 6 o'clock on a Monday morning, it's snowing outside. The first thing you want to do is be on a beach somewhere in Barbados. Now, you reach over, you pick up your iPhone, and you're able to surf and look for inspiration to be able to do that. Then there's the researching phase. That's changed, I'll come on to that. Then there's the booking phase, the experiencing phase, but the big difference is the sharing phase. It was 5 or 6 years ago that you came back from a holiday, you would sit with friends in a local bar and share your experience. Now it's on a large scale through social media. But as Joachim was saying earlier on, with wearable computing, all of a sudden this becomes a very big place to be. As Joachim was saying, we've got Google Glass. I was recently on a British Airways plane wearing Google Glass, and I think I was nearly kicked off for being the biggest geek in Heathrow at that moment in time. But you know, Google Glass is just getting a series of applications which are about facial recognition. This means that I would be able to take a look at this lady here, and I would be able to get scrolling profile in my glass of all of your public data, your Facebook profile, your Twitter profile, etc. I would know more about you than ever if I was having a 4 or 5 hour conversation before I've even spoken to you. And what this does for Thomas Cook is it puts us in a really positive situation because it means that the memories of a good holiday are becoming perpetual. And this is how this is going to get to market. Joachim, you were talking earlier on. I was talking about getting on a plane and looking like a geek. Google have already done a deal, which they announced about three weeks ago. Ray-Ban and Oakley are working with Google Glass. By this time next year, I predict that you will be able to buy a pair of Oakleys that you will use on the beach that will contain Google Glass technology. And that means that you'll be able to photograph, because you simply blink, or video by simply doing 2 blinks, and that's it. All of a sudden, every experience you've had. But the next level experience is this one. This is a device that came out about 4 or 5 months ago out of California and is selling very well. It's called the Clip. And what it does is every 30 seconds, it takes a picture of anything that you're facing. And that's through the whole course of your holiday. Now, for me, there's a memory problem. I went on my first holiday without my parents a terrifying 420 years ago. And I remember taking with me a very pretty blonde girl, and we went to somewhere very hot. I have no memory of what she was called, or where we went, or what we did. And in fact, the 35mm pictures I took at the time are probably buried in a skip north of Sheffield. No memory at all. But what's happening now is that the internet is becoming the external hard drive for our memories. This is great for the Thomas Cook brand and something we are embracing, because what it means is that when you have a good experience on one of our holidays, and Harriet, our chief exec, has made a really big thing about experience being positive and customer service. What this means is that the brand becomes perpetual. So when you're looking at your grandchildren in 30 years' time, I'm sure that's a lot younger for you, but in 30 years' time, when one of the grandchildren says, "Where did you meet Granddad?" you pull up a picture, and that's him drunk in a bar in Malakoff. So this is a big part of it. But going back a little bit, our life has changed. And what we see as one of the great disruptors in the travel industry is mum. Now, in mum's case, 5 or 6 years ago, what would happen is mum would walk into one of our shops. She would make a decision with an agent about where the family was going on holiday. She'd pay for the holiday. She'd come back home, sitting over dinner. She would simply turn round to the whole family and say, "This is where we're going. This is how much we're spending." In other words, it was a completely autocratic decision. This has now changed profoundly, and we need to take account of the disruption this is causing. I'll come on to that in a second. The interesting part here is that research has now become probably 10 times what it was 5 years ago. Again, this is Google research. So 73 days before booking, people start to look for a holiday. 2 hours, 19 minutes normally is the total research time. A lot more time that you would spend in store. What's changed from a technology point of view, some of you will remember 15 years ago the desktop computers that would dial up to the internet at 56K, and you were thinking that was cutting-edge technology. Then Steve Jobs brought us the iPhone about 6, 7 years ago. But the biggest change is the tablet. I can tell you that Thomas Cook, since last Christmas, has seen 20% of its traffic come from tablet-type devices. A good example of this is the Tesco Huddle device that went on sale last Christmas. They sold 450,000 of them in the UK. And where does it fit with what Thomas Cook are doing? Well, I'll come on to that in a second, but one of the great things that we have to solve on the web for the whole of our industry, not just Thomas Cook, is 3 questions. These are 3 questions that people ask. Is this holiday what it says it is? Is this holiday right for me? And is it offering good value for money? Those are profoundly 3 questions, because the problem is that everybody on the internet assumes that this is going to be the case. In other words, what you see is not necessarily what you get. And we'll come on to that in a little while as well. So, the first thing that we did, bearing in mind that we want to be in home when people are making a travel experience, because now what happens, mum goes home, has a conversation around the dinner table with the family all pull out their smart devices, tablets or iPhones or laptops, and they get engaged in the conversation. In other words, the decision process becomes democratic rather than autocratic. So we invented something called Wishlist, which we won the TTI Travel Innovation Award for this year. And what Wishlist does is very simply this. It just bridges the two channels together. If you're sitting in a store with an agent, you look through a dozen holidays, you become inspired by 2 or 3 of them. The agent adds that to a wish list and then very simply emails the wish list to the consumer's home. What we know about this is the effect inside of Thomas Cook has been dramatic. I can't give you the numbers, but what I can tell you is that we're talking a substantial increase in the conversion ratio online and an extraordinary amount of people that are being pushed back into store to make a booking offline. That just goes back to the trust thing because people prefer to talk to agents commonly when they're making a booking. What we do know also is that because of course we track it, the open figures for each email, we found for wishlist emails, they were being opened 2.5 times. Thus, we know that we're getting the engagement in home. And this has become the focus of a very serious campaign, marketing campaign behind Thomas Cook. The next problem that we faced that we needed to solve technology-wise is a tactical problem, and that's this. Is that, let's say, for example, that I wandered into our marble arts store and said, I'd like to go on holiday to the Gambia. And I said, does anybody have any experience in the store? There's 6 or 7 agents in that store, and unfortunately, none of them did. So therefore, tactically, we have a problem. And the agents would have to rely on a brochure, commonly out of date, that would actually tell them what everybody else knows about the Gambia. Ideally, what you want is an agent that's been there 5, 6, 7+ times. So we took a little bit of inspiration here from Apple, and they have this Genius Bar. And commonly on the Genius Bar, what they can do is if they can't find a solution to the problem themselves, they have a company directory they can dial up that other people can that they can actually access people on that directory. We are doing exactly the same thing. So for example, I've been to Rhodes at least 12 times. A customer get hold of me on Skype, on WebEx, on phone, and on a Google Hangout. So we bring the power of all of our 30,000 employees and all of their experience to concentrate on one customer to enrich the whole journey by way of a booking. Then we've got augmented reality. This is something that Google's experimenting with quite a lot. This is cutting-edge stuff. Our German colleagues have built this app, whereby in resort, what you do, because Joachim, as you were saying, we're GPS, we're aware of our location, and what you do is simply point at anything, and it starts to overlay experiences that you have yet to have on that particular environment. As you can see, you actually move this thing around, and it shows you all the stuff that it knows about locally, everything from restaurants to tourist attractions to water parks. So let me talk about what we regard as the future of travel selling. You know, I've been in the computer industry 35 years, and I've seen some progression, it would be fair to say. I have never seen anything like virtual reality. You know, what this does for our industry is extraordinary, because when we try and sell somebody a holiday, commonly for a family, it's the second largest purchase beyond their mortgage that a family will make. Now, if you talk about any other industry, you want to buy a new car, you go take a test drive. You want to buy a book, you look at Amazon's Look Inside. You want to buy a new TV, you go down to Dixon's. What we're asking people to do for a fairly large amount of money is take a leap in the dark about what they're going to be spending it on, because we have no concept, they have no concept of what it's going to be like until they get there. And the expectation management of that part can actually cause us some problems. So what we've done is this. We've been sending teams out to film some of our hotels and some of the resorts. And we've done this in the form which is a virtual reality film. If anybody in here worn one of these virtual reality devices? Okay, well in the minority here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you get the opportunity, go do it, because it's seriously a life-changing opportunity. You know, what we did was we filmed one of the inside of our new aircraft, and we took the device down to our Blue Water store in Kent, and we just put it on 2 or 3 customers, and within 2 or 3 customers, we had one of those customers actually upgrade because they saw the premium seats rather than the economy seats that they were actually booked into. In fact, the biggest thing that we've done very recently and tested, we had a team go out to Rhodes, and they used a waterproof camera, and they used it in a water park. And what we were able to do is we were able to capture the experience of somebody going down a water slide into a pool, and we've turned that into a VR video. We tested it on a couple of 12-year-old kids, and there's that fantastic thing called Pester Power, and we believe that this capability will give us closure ratios north of 90%. So, we use disruption to paint a picture for all of our employees about how we need to transform as a business to make us totally digital. We use that disruption to innovate. We have a team of external innovators, the Digital Advisory Board, which I chair. It's been really effective under Harriet's leadership over the past 18 months. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, John. And do take a seat. We've got time to ask John and Joachim some questions. 2 great presentations, I thought. Fascinating stuff. Who'd like to ask the first question? Well, while you're all thinking, maybe I should start, guys. And gosh, Joachim, you talked about technology developing more rapidly. And John, you talked about your book, I Disrupted and I Disruption. I just wonder what your view is, guys, whether you think the pace of change of technology is going to get so rapid that there'll actually be a backlash against technology. People just feel overloaded, whether we'll reach that stage. Any thoughts, guys, on that?
Let me just pick that up. In terms of rate of technology advance, we did some mathematics, and if the performance of cars had tracked the performance of computer chips since 1965, we discovered that by the end of this decade, cars would be capable of the speed of light. We call this this is acceleration and accelerating of technology. Will people rebel against it? We know in San Francisco, if you're wearing a pair of Google glasses, a lot of people take objection to the privacy part of that, and a number of people have been attacked in the street for wearing them. However, we think that's the minority. When we're talking about virtual reality headsets that kids will be using, getting them out of them are going to be a really big problem. I think the adoption curve will become faster and flatter.
So you think we're actually adapting to the pace of change?
Not of our age, no, but it's distinctly possible that the younger generations will be.
Joachim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that, technology can outrun itself as such. I think that the question is how do you take this cutting-edge technology and make something useful out of it? So it's not about technology as such, it's about the usage and the functionality that makes the difference.
Okay, well, I'll come back to that point in a minute. Who'd like to ask a question? Okay, well, while you're all thinking about that, let me just come back to that point, Joachim, because that's an interesting one. I wrote down here a few of the innovation dead ends that we've had. I think 3D TV is an innovation dead end. I remember Betamax from Sony. You're both too young to remember that, but that was a bit of a dead end. And I remember when we first had electronic point of sale, it's the store John Lewis put magnetic barcodes on their price tags rather than actual barcodes. I'd throw it all away. Some of the technologies you're talking about now, some of them that you're introducing, and John, particularly you, because on behalf of Thomas Cook, you're trying to grasp them and find ways of using them. Does it concern you that you might be grasping technology that's just a fad this year and it will fade away tomorrow?
Two responses to that. The first one is that Henry Ford said, if we'd have asked our customers what they'd have wanted, we'd have given them faster horses. So I think part of the innovation curve is about inspiration. And I think the other part of it is that when you've got companies like Apple and Google driving adoption, so what you referred to as the iBeacon, I'm seeing iBeacon text. I mean, the ability to walk into Waitrose and have your mobile phone take your shopping list and then point you which aisle, which part of the aisle that you should go to has to be just good news, especially for people like me that get frustrated in supermarkets. So I do think that we need to inspire people with technology. And I think the Apple iWatch, nobody said that there is a requirement for an intelligent watch. But I'll be queuing at 3 o'clock in the morning to go get one.
Well, I thought all the real cool people, John, didn't wear watches, all the ones I know, but we've all got them on.
I'm too poor.
So will you put one watch on, or will you have a smart watch on that wrist and a clock one on the other wrist? One on each. Joachim, can you think of innovative technology that just hasn't worked, that might have been a waste of time?
Well, you know, basically our labs team's primary mission is to take all this new tech and play with it and think about possible use cases. And I also think that, you know, most big innovations comes out of failure, so that you should never be afraid to try and try and try, because eventually you will find this, as John talked about, disruptive functionality that will really change the way we think about travel. One of my best examples of innovation is Morse code. Morse code came out of Samuel Morse trying to invent the phone. And he was a bit early, but he also figured out that in his failures, he could actually communicate without talking. And that's how Morse code came around. And in fact, that is still used in the military. It's also used in travel, where all the radio beacons around the airports around the world has Morse code. And then the pilots knows that they're close to the airport, should any of the other computerized systems fail.
So a quick show of hands, who knows Morse code? There we are, a few hands went up.
Yeah.
Okay. So you must do a bit of flying then? So you must do a bit of flying then?
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Okay, fine. Who'd like to ask a question? I'm doing a lot of work here. Yes, wait for the microphone and hold the microphone quite close. Stand up so we can all see you, please. And could you just tell us who you are, where you're from? Hold the microphone very close.
Hi, I'm Mark Hodson. I work for 101 Holidays.
Thank you.
Thanks for both the presentations, which are really interesting. I'm one of the many people who've never used a virtual reality headset. And I'd really love to, particularly after John's description of it. Why aren't we all using them if they're so compelling? What are the barriers to these rolling out?
So virtual reality's only been around for reality in the past probably 3 months in the capability to do mass production devices. One of the VR companies that had been in business for about 4 weeks was bought for $2 billion by Facebook. You can imagine actually a 4-week company, old 4-week-old company that was bought for a couple of $1 billion. And this particular company, the gamble that they've got is they want to put virtual reality headsets into every single home in the world. Why? Because virtual reality is unbelievable when you play computer games on it, because the ability to look around 360 degrees, you can imagine if you're playing something like Call of Duty, it becomes a completely immersive experience. I'm never going to get off the sofa. It's in Facebook's interest to make sure that those devices are incredibly cheap. And I think you'd probably be looking, I hope you'd be looking at around 99 to 199 pounds per unit, in which case it's in the PS3, Xbox type scenario. I think that we'll see very fast adoption there.
Joachim, your thoughts on immersive
I've had the fortune of being able to work a lot with it and think about how we can take virtual reality into travel. As I said, there's been a lot of work shifted from creating sort of fantasy worlds that would feel real into real worlds, but you experience them virtually. And I think there are some constraints there, because it takes quite expensive equipment to create those virtual reality movies, I'm sure. And there are also challengers coming up, not doing exactly the same, but pretty similar. There's a brand new device called Google Cardboard, and it's actually a cardboard that looks like a goggle. And you take your smartphone and put it in, and there are several applications where you can actually experienced by moving around up and down, and you basically get the same sensation as you do with Oculus Rift. And I also think that with Oculus Rift, you have this big headset with a lot of cables, and you have to have a motion camera and things like that. So I think it's a bit of a, you know, in the very beginning of that technology, and it will be refined, I'm sure. And now with the support of Facebook buying them, I'm sure that's going to be a very fast evolution. But in my mind, there's still a bit of a way to go. You get a bit dizzy as well when you wear them for a while.
So when we put the one down into our Blue Water store, one of the things that we did, we had a smell-making machine. I didn't even know that they existed, and what we're able to do is actually pipe through the smell of a beach and coconut while people were actually wearing the VR headset, and a lot of people came back and said, this is the most incredible experience. Yeah. It felt like, and I've used one, a much more advanced one, the one you've been talking about, and I was climbing a cliff on it, and I looked down and there was a bloke behind me, and I got vertigo. I mean, it was just, it was so realistic. I think in response to your question about production, I think that there's a lot of professional photographers on the marketplace, and the problem is with things like the iPhone 6, which have got fantastic cameras now, it's making everybody almost a professional photographer. So the food chain moves around a little bit, and a lot of those guys, apologize to the professional photographers in the auditorium here, will actually move into the whole generation of virtual reality video creation, because that's where they can make the next level of money. We see that marketplace accelerating very rapidly.
Okay, we'll see what happens there. Let's take another question if we can. Who'd like to ask another question? Oh yes, hand just there, yes. Have you got a microphone? Do stand up and do tell us who you are, where you're from, please.
Hi, I'm Dan Beccari, Head of Travel at Criteo. One question that comes back every time we look at innovation is how do you actually measure the value of a new technology? So just the fact that it's new and it's cool and you know, you get sensations or experiences that you couldn't have before, it's definitely good. But then when it comes to signing a check, you get back to, okay, but how is this going to improve my business? So would you like to spend a few words on how you actually would measure any kind of innovation from a commercial success perspective?
And John, would you like to maybe take that first? Because, of course, Thomas Cook, I don't know whether you've been given a budget to play or whether you actually have to make a business case to try new things out and introduce innovation.
So that's an interesting scenario, Paul, because most corporates work on the basis of any form of innovation is questioned by legions of middle managers to the point that everybody, it feels like an out of life experience. What startups tend to do is startups are actually focused on failing. And the focus on failing is try it, see if it fails, learn something, iterate, iterate, iterate. And I think under those circumstances, the ROI looks like this. For corporates, they tend to look at the return on investment over an innovation at the end of the life of the innovation. In other words, as it goes into production. And that generally is a 2 to 3 year scenario. For the businesses I've invested in at an early stage, we don't look at that at all. What we look at is the value of the technology projected forward 7 or 8 years. So Facebook buying the VR company I spoke about for $2 billion after just essentially what was a couple of months, is Facebook was buying it for its future value as a technology business, not for its revenues. So I think it depends on the stage of the innovation. I think it's later stage, then you can project it for a lifetime of maybe 3 years, get an ROI there. But if it's earlier stage, you've got to take a completely different method of valuing it.
Joachim, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. How do you measure innovation? You can't really, because as I said before, innovation often comes out of failure. And, you know, one of my roles and also my colleagues in Sabre Labs is to embrace this brand new technology. And as John said, the more you fail, you know, the more other ideas you might have around a specific, maybe a wearable or a brand new technology as such. So, I mean, all we know is that we have to embrace whatever comes out there, think about and try it and try to break it. And out of that, sometimes we find this little golden nugget that can become the next big change in travel.
Okay, fine. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to move on to our speakers, but next speakers, let's thank Joachim and John very much for two great opening presentations. And Joachim, this has initials JE on it. Would it be yours?
Yes, it would. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Thanks. Thanks, there we are. Yeah. Unfortunately, they're both busy people. They have to move on, so they won't be around to talk afterwards. Let me invite Sharon and Joel to come and take their seats, if I may, and then I shall introduce them both. Come and sit down, guys. So we're moving on to a session that I called Moving with the Times, looking at what companies are actually doing now to keep up to date with innovation and the moving market. And sitting closest to me is Joel Brandon-Bravo. He's UK Managing Director of Travelzoo, and is quite well known in the travel industry from Frommer's and other places he's been to previously. And Joel, thank you for being one of the sponsors of the event. And sitting next to him there is Sharon. Sharon Doyle is Vice President of Product Management at GTA, which is probably one of the world's very largest accommodation wholesalers, or maybe the world's largest accommodation wholesaler.
Largest.
Hopefully the largest, we'll see. So ladies and gentlemen, let's first of all welcome Joel for his presentation.
Green, great. Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. So, yes, I've been in the online travel industry now for 15 years, as Paul said, for the last 5 years with Travelzoo. So what I'm going to try and do in the next 15 minutes is just talk a little bit about how technology is forcing businesses to move with the times, to stay on track, and actually to grow before focusing specifically maybe around travel and how Travelzoo in particular are doing that. And I wanted to start with this picture. Maybe half the audience will relate to him in the same way that I do, in terms of around 25 years ago, the explosion of gadgetry that we had. All these things were new and exciting at the time. You were talking about Betamax video recorders, electronic typewriters, scientific calculators, radios, portable music systems, camcorders, all of these things. And what's interesting about them is that here we are, 25 odd years later, and all of that stuff and more, I mean, it could have filled that up with things like everything from board games to spirit levels, now sits quite happily on your mobile device, which also handily has a stopwatch, which I'll use to try and stay on track with the presentation. So this is even my music player, which sort of segues quite nicely into the fact that before I got into the travel industry, the online travel industry, I was actually in the music business for most of the 90s. And as you can see from this chart, the reason I'm talking about the music industry is not just from my own personal experience, but I think the music industry was one of those industries that first felt the wave of technology and change the soonest, the hardest, and was probably one of the slowest of all the industries to respond. And you can see from this chart, apologies if you can't see the detail, but the introduction of Napster in 1999, for those that don't know, it was an online file sharing service to enable people to copy and download music. But what it did is this chart tracks the value of shipped music products, CDs, vinyl, that sort of thing, and you can see that it basically tanked from that point, from $15 billion down to about six or seven only a few years ago. Some of that was made up from digital distribution, but I bet if you spoke to the record labels at the time and said to them that a manufacturer of desktop computers was going to own that distribution channel, or the majority of it, in 10 years' time, they would have laughed you out the room. Most of them are probably, like me, no longer in the music industry. The other significant point was that fortunately I made the wise decision to actually sell up and get out of the music business and join you guys in the travel industry at that point in 1999. But looking at some other industries, I'd say the automotive industry is one that was much slower in terms of the impact of technology and what it's had, although certainly some of the US automotive companies lost a lot of market share to the Asian manufacturers who were much earlier in terms of adopting electric technology. I mean, this is a Telsa vehicle which they're hoping to shift 500,000 vehicles of next year. But the more recent developments in the automotive industry, I'm sure you've all heard about the driverless cars and driverless technology. So they've already been testing those out in California. The UK government has just granted Google approval to try driverless cars, I think initially in Milton Keynes here in the UK. And what's interesting about driverless cars and what Google's sort of PR team do say compared to what they don't say. What they do say is that driverless cars are going to create much more efficiency because lots of cars all traveling at consistent speeds instead of starting and stopping is going to create this much greater efficiency. It's actually going to be greener. It's going to use less energy. Wow, Google's really helping us to be green. That's great. They're even saying that they're going to be safer, that driverless cars won't make the same mistakes that people do. So actually, Google's going to be saving lives. What the PR team don't say is that what are people actually going to be doing with that hour that they've previously spent staring out the window and steering the wheel in an internet-enabled car. They'll be using that time to do more searches and therefore engage with Google and generate search revenue for them. But talking about Google segues nice into this one. John talked about a company worth $2 billion. This is Nest, for those that haven't heard of it, is a company that provide a wireless home thermostat so that you can control the temperature of your home from your smartphone, and maybe instead of just having it on a timer as you're on the bus or the tube on the way home, you can just set the heating to come on so it's nice and warm. Google paid $3.2 billion for this company, not, I think, because Google's particularly interested in being in the domestic temperature control business, but what Google are certainly interested in is being in control of all of those wireless devices that we're going to have in our home, from the phones with their Android platform through to, it seems, all those other mechanisms for controlling the environment and any other devices that you'd have in the house. And back to my old employer, the music business. I don't know how many of you use Sonos now. Instead of rifling through broken CD cases to find empty cases of the CD you were looking for, your entire music system now stored on one server in your house, accessible from any room, playing different things, every single music radio station on the planet, again, accessible through your mobile device. So this is how technology is rippling through all of these industries. And I've always been in travel in terms of travel publishing. And the publishing business, again, was one of those industries like music that's just really seen an absolute sea change in what technology has done to them as businesses. You know, the traditional ways, whether it was the Times, the Daily Mail, all these traditional publishing sources, which was where people used to get their information. Now, as you know, companies like Twitter, founded in 2006 and valued now at $25 billion. BuzzFeed, 150 million monthly unique users and already valued themselves at around 850 million. And Yahoo, I don't know if any of you have got the News Digest app on your mobile phone, but that was actually written by a 17-year-old as part of a GCSE project and then acquired by Yahoo for 30 million because they wanted to own the way in which people are consuming that media. So what about the traditional travel business? John obviously talked about Thomas Cook. I mean, we're talking about a 170-year-old business that 5 years ago was on the brink of bankruptcy. But through a series of operational rationalization and that omni-channel, that offline-online approach is now back on its feet and worth 1.7 billion again. Puoni, trying to reinvent the in-store experience but match it equally with the offline experience. And I don't know if any of you have seen the YouTube TV commercial for the Scottish small travel agency, Thorn Travel. But a YouTube commercial made for just I think £1,700 they spent on it, now been viewed over 1 million times online, partly because it's so bad, but so bad it's funny. And actually their business, as a result, in October alone, is up 110%. So that's the traditional people in the travel. What about, John again talked about disruptors. There have been a lot of disruptors. Booking.com, absolute huge nowadays. All they did was do online hotel booking better than it was previously being done. So not necessarily a disruptor in the same way as sites like One Fine Stay or Airbnb, which were basically just platforms for allowing people to share their room or their second property and rent it out. And Airbnb now valued much higher, even though it's basically a platform with no assets, than a lot of the traditional hotel chains like Hilton and Marriott. And Uber, down there in the bottom left, I mean, the original disruptor was Halo, that connected people to black cabs quickly and easily and enabled them to see how far away that black cab was. Well, they were the disruptor, and in the last 2 years, Uber have been the disruptor of the disruptor, just connecting minicab drivers. So much so that Halo have had to pull out of the US because of the rise of Uber. Again, Uber, $18 billion valuation for a company that barely existed 5 years ago. So in terms of Travelzoo and how are we trying to move with the times, well, we're a 1998 company as well. We've been around for sort of 16 years, so we have to keep moving with the times in order to innovate. At the moment, we're in 25 offices worldwide, 11 countries, and our business is built around having people who subscribe via email, and then we send them travel deals right across the spectrum of travel products, from hotels to packaged products, airline sales, etc. So we've had to innovate because people aren't always going to be using their emails as their interface. A lot of the big investment for us has been around growing our social audience and, more importantly, growing our mobile audience. So where we've been for years and years was sending out a blanket sort of nationwide email. It's called the Top 20, and it had the top 20 deals of the week. But then in the last few years, we said, okay, well, actually, because we've got people's postcodes, we can now target what we send them. So if they just want a UK break, maybe an hour or two's drive away, we can send them specific deals relevant to them. And then about 2 years ago, realizing that actually we could work with hoteliers to help them fill their restaurant or their spa or other local providers by just targeting the local audience. So in terms of how it works, and this is relevant because this has had to evolve, a very traditional style of email, the top 20, trying to drive people to a landing page which we would create where we would provide an image gallery, provide a description of the product, describe the deal itself. But then we would get people to call whoever the travel agency was to book, or we'd pass them over onto their site. And that's worked pretty well for 15 years. It's now a $150 million business. And how do we grow it? Well, the Asimov model for growth, yes, we can develop existing products in existing markets. That's just growing your audience. The change is all around developing new products to engage with our existing audience, and then market development in other markets. So I'm not going to obviously read through all the developments, and to be honest, all the things that we're doing in terms of new products and in new markets, there's way more than this, but it's about making sure that there's this constant evolution, both in terms of your markets and what you're offering them. But fundamentally, there are two key trends that are driving change at Travelzoo. The first, which I talked about in terms of being mobile, and the second, where I've bundled together kind of localization and personalization. And you're hearing a lot about mobile. I mean, I've heard at the beginning of this year, they were saying this year will be the year, sometime this year, when more searches will be done on tablets and on mobile devices than on desktop. Well, actually, at Travelzoo, we passed that in April of this year. So already for the last 4 or 5 months, there have been more people coming to visit the travel deals that we're promoting via a tablet or via a mobile device. So therefore, it's absolutely key for us to engage with people in the way in which they're trying to engage with us. So I would always recommend developing a mobile website, ideally optimized for devices, responsive design first, because then everyone can access it. And only after then to start looking at, does it make sense to invest the time and money in terms of app and downloads. So that's something that we've done, and we've done relatively successfully. But the next stage for us then was to say, okay, we've had a very good business in terms of push. The inspiration piece, trying to say, if you're still undecided about where to go, we'll send you an email once a week with 20 great deals. We'll have checked them out. We'll make sure the resorts are nice. And we'll also make sure that those deals are test booked and checked for availability and ease of purchase. The bit that we were doing pretty badly, if I'm honest, other than just formatting on the slides there, apologies for that, is people who've already got something in mind about where they want to go or when they want to go. The sort of the what, where, when of travel. So in terms of us being able to move with the times, it's to be able to go beyond just curating a limited set of travel deals to say, yes, we still want to be doing that well. We still want to be inspiring people by giving them suggestions of where to go. But we also need to be able to respond to their needs in terms of becoming more search-based and also doing it across whatever platform or device they want to do it on. So if you took that traditional user experience that I said have worked very well for us for 15 years, and then you overlay that into the mobile space, and I'll apologize in advance if the Hotel Alfonso are actually in the room, but this is pretty typical of the hotel industry. Whereas before, someone would have read an offer that we'd sent out to them and then clicked to go and purchase that offer and left our service to go to the hotel's website. I mean, you probably can't even see up here on the top left of this, we've passed them over to the hotel's website, and this is actually their booking engine. I mean, how anybody's going to have a mobile phone in one hand, a credit card in the other, and use those tiny little drop-down menus in order to be able to book? You know, it just doesn't happen. The bounce rate is huge. The drop-off rate is huge. The conversion just doesn't happen. So in many ways, that slow response has forced us to then move with the times. I mean, it is a big problem in travel. For only half of the top 50 companies to have a mobile-optimized website, it's pretty terrible. Only half to have an app, of which only 14 out of those top 50 are transactional. Poor. And 16 of the top 50 having no mobile presence at all. I mean, this is shocking, considering what we should be doing to respond to how the consumer wants to engage with us as an industry. So what did we do to try and fix it? I mean, we'd been a publisher. We hadn't been a hotel booking engine. So the first thing that we needed to do was actually to enable ourselves to take bookings directly, to own that booking process, rather than sending people off to 1,000 different companies with 1,000 different experiences, at least half of which were poorly optimized. Then to go beyond just the deal that we were telling people about, they might like that, but say, but I don't really want to spend that much money, or I quite want to go to somewhere nearby, but not in that position, or I want a different style of property, to then say, okay, well, here's what we think is the best deal. But actually, if you want a few other things, then we give them a single view of what else was available that was similar. But most vitally for us was to then make that mobile transaction as easy as possible. So for us, if someone's actually allowed us to store their credit card data, the next time they want something from us, they can just use one big button and confirm the payment. I was at the annual hotel conference in Manchester a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying they were already doing tests around not trying to take 18 fields of data off people on a mobile in order to confirm a hotel booking, but to just take the email address. And the early data was showing that actually the number of no-shows wasn't significantly higher, and actually that was enough. And therefore, in the mobile space, maybe that's what you should all be doing in order to take a booking and then follow it up later, rather than just lose people at that stage where they get halfway through filling out a form and then get distracted by a call or having to get off the bus or whatever it happened to be. So for us, that was absolutely key, just trying to make that purchase as simple as possible. So John had it as a wheel. There are all sorts of different ways of looking at the travel planning and booking process. The inspiration phase, I think that we've always done very well at, setting out the ideas. The transaction piece, we're having to fix because generally the travel industry is so disparate and at different levels of sophistication and conversion rates. And then the final piece, which we're only just starting to do, is that in-destination that John was also talking about. So who else is doing it pretty well? Well, we know Booking.com taking over the world in terms of hotel bookings, but equally TripAdvisor. And what are these two enormous travel companies doing? Well, actually, Booking.com recently bought OpenTable in a multi-billion-dollar transaction, so that because they know where you're going, you've booked a hotel. They've got your arrival date, they've got your departure date. They own the customer there. They're much better positioned to then say, and here are some restaurant offers, or here's some restaurants that are nearby the hotel that you're staying in. TripAdvisor dipping their toe into the same space with the purchase of La Fourchette in France. So that in-destination presents an opportunity for us and maybe for you as well, because what are people doing with their mobile device? Well, over 40% are looking for local activities. They want to book restaurants. They want to see shows, and they're looking for that content on their smartphone. So for us, that's an opportunity because we were already sourcing that type of content so that we could email it out based on people's postcodes. And then when we know where people are going, actually then we can do it when they're in destination and saying, look, we've got some great shows, we've got some great restaurant deals that you could also engage with. Just so that we can close that loop off from the inspiration stage, improve that kind of transactional stage, improve that booking, and then when they're there, offer them additional interesting options and development. And it's only through doing that, I mean, obviously there's one way we can grow our business, which is to keep investing in more and more subscribers. But actually the more interesting and the more long-term and the more sustainable approach is to constantly look at and revisit the products that we're offering, making sure that we're really answering all of the needs, the what, where, when of the people who are coming to us. And hopefully that way we can keep moving with the times. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Very insightful. We'll have a few questions for you. Our next speaker, of course, works for GTA, and GTA used to be called Gulliver's Travel Agency. That's why it's called GTA. And if I'm not mistaken, Sharon, GTA were one of the first travel companies in the marketplace using a computer reservation system.
Yes, absolutely.
No, going way back to the 1980s.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear about the future of travel from Sharon Doyle.
Thank you. So when I was thinking about this presentation about moving with the times, I was thinking, you know, I was sure somebody was going to talk about mobile. I was sure somebody was probably going to talk about, mention things like virtual reality. Certainly talk about iPhones. And I was thinking to myself, you know, in terms of distribution, what do intermediaries, especially in the B2B space like GTA, what do we think about moving with the times is about? And how does that impact the people that we work with, the partners we work with? So the hotels, the suppliers in the destinations, and the tour operators and travel agents that we work with every day. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, is almost trends in distribution technology and how actually you guys can take advantage of those trends today. So real things you can start to do with your technology departments right now in order to make those trends a reality in your organization. So what do GTA do? Thank you, Paul, for that introduction. So GTA is a B2B travel distributor. We source travel products and we sell them to tour operators and travel agents, both online and in the traditional market. I guess when we think about what it is we want to aim for, it's about making the world easier to travel through the use of technology and also in-destination expertise, so how we can actually help the traveler have a good trip. And after all, that's what we all are here for, is to make sure that that traveler does have a good trip. Sometimes that gets lost in the midst of all the technology. And as an intermediary, our job is about seamlessly connecting that traveler, our clients, the travel agents and tour operators, as well as the suppliers in the organization. So, so why the urgency? I don't think it's certainly the urgency now. I think we're past that. I think this has been the change, or the level of change in the industry in terms of technology has probably been happening for about the last 5 years, and that's certainly accelerating and accelerating faster and faster. The guys in the first presentation talked a little bit about this, but there's actually a prediction known as the technological singularity. And that's this graph here we see at the top of the slide. And it puts us around that little arch. We're there, maybe. But the basic prediction is that about the year 2023, so that's less than 10 years away, that computing power will have actually reached the same level of power that we can actually process within a single human mind at any one given time. And by 2025, or 2045, excuse me, that computing power would have actually outstripped the collective power of all human thinking. So that's not that far away in terms of what we're actually looking at. I don't necessarily think that we'll hit those, but it's an interesting way to think of the industry and the way that actually we're seeing acceleration within that technology. We've seen it certainly across the distribution channel, moving from the traditional, I guess, bricks and mortar travel agent to the use of phone and fax. When we talked about reservation systems, it was all done on fax back there. In fact, actually, I can still think of some code that I have that's still about faxing within the industry. And it's important to remember that's how a lot of the industry still works, actually. So, you know, when we talk about things like some of the really new trends, we've got to remember that there's trends or there's things that are still happening right now in the industry that we still need to be able to support. We saw the introduction, obviously, of online travel agents, so the desktop and laptop, and now into mobile. And as John mentioned, you know, it's only 7 years since we saw the introduction of the iPhone, 4 years since the iPad came on the market. I certainly go to very little meetings now where most of my colleagues are not sitting there tapping away on an iPad. 4 years ago, that was only introduced to the market. Google Glass last year, and Apple Watch, we're already talking about it, and it's going to be released next year. So, you know, there's a very quick, we're seeing that time frame really increase in terms of how technology is changing the industry. And, you know, as an intermediary and as a travel agent, and when I talk to my suppliers, my hotel suppliers out there, chains, various transfers or tours and activities, you know, they're kind of thinking to myself, it's almost an apocalyptic tale. How do we keep how do we keep pace with that change in the industry? And, for that reason, I decided that I would talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. But I thought that maybe famine and death and pestilence and war might be a little bit heavy for WTM. So we've actually got the 4 Lego men up there. And the 4 areas that I'm going to talk about are the complexity of distribution, the context of distribution, disruption within the distribution channel, and also data sharing or protection, and we'll come on to that. So let's go on first to President Business, the complexity area. And distribution is hard. If you go out there and you talk to any hotel manager, they will tell you, we don't know how to manage our channels. We don't know how to price them. We're not sure which channels we're appearing on. We don't know what price we're appearing on, and we don't actually know how to get on those channels in the first place. So it is hard. It's really hard. But I'm going to talk about 2 things in particular. I'm going to talk about search accuracy, and I'm going to talk about the global nature of distribution from a technology aspect. So search accuracy. This is the ability to have the correct rate and availability on a channel that you're actually distributing on. Now, that may seem like an easy thing to do, but which channel and who is selling you? The industry is very convoluted in terms of how actually product gets distributed. And often we're appearing, or hotels are appearing, on channels whereby their rate and availability at the time of search may no longer be available at the time of booking. We all talk about reprice. We talk about checking again to see whether that price and availability is still there. I think as an industry, we kind of need to think about how we're going to address this. And these are not as exciting as the virtual reality things, or even as exciting maybe as mobile. But these are real problems that we see in the industry every day that we need to address. Meta search creates huge amounts of complexity in terms of this as well. And I think that there are ways of actually fixing this, and I probably would direct people, especially hoteliers in the audience, to go and talk to people like HEDNA, which is an organization. They've got a very long name. It's the Hotel Electronic Distribution Network Association. But they're doing some great work out there in terms of how to try to figure out to eliminate these data accuracy and rates and availability problems. And there are ways of doing this. There's push-pull technologies. There's ways of using cache in a better way. And there's certainly things like rendered shopping, or FPLOS is a new term that we'll see around, which is full pattern length of stay, which is instead of having nightly rates and offers that you put together, you think about the cost of the entire stay instead. So search accuracy is something that definitely we need to address, but there are ways of addressing that today. The other thing that I'm going to mention in terms of complexity is actually in terms of the global complexity or distribution on a global scale. And the first one I'm going to talk about is performance, so speed. So we have data accuracy. We also need to be really fast. And intermediaries, OTAs, and even from a perspective of hotels, of PMS and CRS systems, they need to be able to respond to searches with accurate data. If you are moving into a global distribution channel, you need to think, how do I distribute globally, and how do I make sure that my search is fast across the globe? And there's a number of ways to do that. And again, I would point you guys to, if you're ever thinking about that, certainly things like cloud computing helps with that. Multiple data centers, very costly, of course, so you're increasing your cost of distribution there substantially through global distribution centers, but also things like CDNs, content delivery networks, which allow you pretty much like a private path through the internet, so you don't get routed all over the world. And there are ways of addressing the global performance issues. I also would say to people, people talk to me about China and the growth in Asia. Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge, huge region. The growth is phenomenal there. But when I ask them what they're doing to address those things from a technology or even a legal aspect, I'm often met with very blank faces. And China in particular, if you are a wholly owned foreign entity in China, you cannot put servers into China. You can only operate outside of China, so probably in South Korea or in Hong Kong. And in order to gain a license to operate in China, you have to go through a very long legal application with the Chinese government. It's very, very difficult to get that. So I would say if you are thinking about China as a growth area, start to think about the legal applications of that and about how you would actually meet those legal application needs. And finally, one other thing that I always look at when I think about global distribution is how do travelers pay? So payment technologies. It's easy for us to sit here in England and think, oh, you know, PayPal or MasterCard, Visa card. So MasterCard and Visa card have less than 1% of the actual credit card industry in China, less than 1%. If you are selling in China, you need to be thinking about a different technology for actually, or a different way of paying for your travelers to pay. Union card is obviously the big card in China, but you know, also if you look at places like Brazil, it's mainly a cash society. How do you work as an online company in a mainly cash society? And there are ways around that through things called billets, that you go to the 7-Eleven and pay, or also things like installments are very big in Brazil. So again, when you're thinking about global distribution, you need to think about the issues that you're going to have to address, both legally and from a technology aspect, in order to be able to meet those. Okay, so Wild Style. So she's looking for the perfect trip, the perfect, authentic trip, the trip that she's like dreamt about for the last year. She's got this image of it in her head, and she goes online to search for it, and she gets 15 pages of search results. She thinks, how do I get that down? How do I, you know, how does it become specific to me? How is the context of the trip that I'm going on specific to me? And this is the whole idea behind context. How do you meet the context of the traveler? How do you respond to actually what she needs in terms of the trip? It was interesting, Focusrite last year, their theme of their conference was the cult of context. So really thinking about how do I actually respond to that? I think the traditional travel agent that you talk to that asks you questions about your trip, that can look at you, can see how you dress, know it's a family trip, they do this really well, and they do this really quickly in their own heads. And this is almost going back to the idea of the technology singularity again. They do that far faster than a computer can. They can ask a couple of questions and really be able to narrow down to a response that meets the person's needs. But we are seeing this move on to the online world with what we call semantic search or natural language. And we had a guy from Sabre earlier on, but they're doing some very interesting things with their APIs. I saw about 2 weeks ago they released something in Canada which they call the Intelligent API. And it basically allowed you to ask the API a question. I want to go on a sunny trip for less than £500 in March. And the API could actually begin to respond. Now, when you get the back-end computing, being able to do that fast enough to be able to respond with the same accuracy as a travel agent, then you're really beginning to see a shift in the industry. But I think you can actually start to do these things now through big data. I think people get afraid of that word. It's definitely bandied around the industry far more than actually, or in far more circles, or it seems to be all over the shop. But actually, it's really just analytics. It's big analytics, so big number crunching. It's not that difficult. You can start small and build up, would be my recommendations on that. And in order to be able to get into that analysis, you need to have intelligent and smart APIs. Certainly what you need to be here is you need to be relevant for the traveler. And I always come back to the traveler. So you need to really be thinking about how do I actually make sure my search is for them. Okay, Emmett, so disruption. This has come up, I think, in the last 3 presentations about disruption. For me, I actually think of disruption as how do I make sure I'm on that channel? So Airbnb is a great example here. When I think of Airbnb, I almost relate them in some ways back to the low-cost carriers 15 years ago. So everybody thought, oh, what's going to happen? LCCs, they're on the market, you know, it's going to be. But ultimately, what they did was they had more travelers traveling. I mean, that's what we've seen, basically, as the introduction of low-cost carriers. And when I think of somebody like Airbnb, and people may say, well, they're going to be completely disruptive to a company like GTA, that, you know, their mainstay is hotels. I don't think so, actually. I think I would like to look at them and say, how do I make sure that I'm also bookable on that channel? You know, maybe the person wants to stay 5 nights in somebody's house, but 2 nights, you know, in a 5-star hotel. I want to be bookable. And that would be the key thing, I think, around disruption, is look at your channels. Yes, there is a cost associated with the different channels, but make sure you're bookable. Make sure that you're on those channels. Again, think of the traveler and make sure that you can respond to their request on the channel that they choose to actually operate on. It definitely brings opportunities. And my favorite guy, scribble face bad cop. So data sharing. I think there is a level of mistrust in terms of data sharing in our industry. Certainly I see that as an intermediary, and you know, we're probably as bad as everybody else, but I'd like to see this change. I'd like to see us think about opening the channels up in terms of sharing data. So from wherever we get the data, let's pass that data along to the end supplier to make sure that when, you know, John Smith rocks up at Starwood, that they know who he is and they know that he's a Starwood preferred guest and generally travels with business. We seem to not want to do that. Travel agents, online travel agents, we all hold little pieces of information about the traveler, and we don't share it along the channel. And I think that unless we really start to do that, we're going to see we're going to see people come into the industry that will disrupt that and just move around us. So I think, again, as an industry, we need to address that problem of actually mistrust and data sharing across the industry. Think traveler again, think partner versus competitor. I like to think of it as big mother versus big brother. Data sharing can be sometimes a little creepy, so it should be more embracing as a mother would be. And also the idea of the circle of trust, you know, don't misuse the data that you are given. Make sure it's used for the right thing to make sure that that person actually is getting the best trip out of it. Okay, so key takeaways, I think, from me. Yeah, it is hard. There are things we can address right out there now. Look to places like Hedna. Focus on the traveler. I mean, certainly with context and data sharing, it's all about making sure that the traveler actually has the best experience wherever you are in that channel of distribution. Just as GTA are in the middle of it, I think that we always need to think about the traveler at the end of the day. And I think disruption just generally brings opportunities, and we should look at them like that. So GTA, you know, we consider ourselves one of the leading travel technology providers in the industry. We have some of the highest search volumes. I think we're dealing between something like 200 to 300 million searches a day. And if you want to talk about it more, please come to our stand, and I'm sure we'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, Paul.
Two great presentations there. And Joel, talking about music industry, you remind me, I had a friend over last night who's going through my old vinyl collection that I haven't looked at for ages. He was telling me how much my Led Zeppelin 1's worth, apparently a fortune. So all onto eBay, start selling our vinyl after this. Who'd like to ask the first question? Okay, let me just touch on big data, because you both mentioned it. And you started off, Joel, by mentioning that you're targeting your I call them your client base, not really your client, but your client base on postcode, trying to offer them local items. Are you going to be taking big data further, trying to get to know your customers better? Because I just think that big data is actually about small data, isn't it?
Indeed, yes, and that's kind of you know, that's part of the challenge for us, and it's definitely something that we're embracing, because I think people are getting kind of email overload. I think if you get smarter with what you're sending, for us, you know, losing a subscriber, having someone say to us, "I don't want to get emails from you anymore," is the worst thing that can happen to us. So. In terms of what we're doing, we've done experimentation around intent, because I think there are two typical ways in which you can do relevant communication. One is that you can go through, you know, what I call it goes to the Experian, the Mosaic, the Acorn, the trying to understand who your customers are. And then once you've overlaid that onto your own customer database, to then say, well, if this person's buying this, then this person is like them, and I can do that. That is one route to go. It's not what we're doing, because actually I think there's a much more valuable way, and that's click intent. So because we know what people have clicked on when they've come and browsed on the site, we have a pretty good idea that they're actually looking for and interested in that type of product. To give you a bit of insight into then how valuable it is, I don't want to send, I'll give you a use case. We had a high-end river cruise company come to us with some distressed inventory, want to do a sale. They wanted us to send out a news flash. Here we go, river cruise on sale. I said, my concern with that is cruising is a niche within the travel market, river cruising is a niche within that niche, and high-end is a niche within a niche within a niche. I don't want to just send everybody a sale or an offer on a river cruise. What I will do is I'll pull out from our database anybody who's ever clicked on a high price point mainstream cruise or a river cruise and just send it to them. Now the click-through rates, I mean, I was expecting them to be higher, but it was literally, the unsubscribe rates were down 80%. The engagement rates were like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times higher. So if I can actually inspire just as many people by sending far fewer, to your point about small data, far fewer emails, but sending them to the right people, then that's better for people. They've got less stuff going in their inbox that's not relevant, and it's better for the travel provider because they're getting in front of just the right customers within our subscriber base.
Okay, and Sharon, we talk a lot about big data and analytics is what it's really about. In the B2C context, targeting consumers, as Joel's just been talking about, is it relevant to a B2B business like GTA?
Yeah. I think maybe from our perspective, we think about it in terms of how do we actually know what the trends are in the industry, you know, what people are searching for, and also be able to look at what's happening in social media as well, to take information out of social media and say, you know, are there destinations that are becoming more talked about on social media that we need to make sure that we actually are sourcing for, you know, the next 6 months. So those type of trends are very much things that we look at within the industry as well.
Okay, fine, thank you. Who'd like to ask a question? Oh yes, there we are. So microphone just there, please. And just hold the microphone close when you speak and do stand up, tell us who you are, where you're from. There's the mic, thank you.
My name is Sanjeev Agarwal. I'm from Fairfax Media, India. My question is, do you see price competition in hotels hotting up? I mean, beyond price parity? Or in other words, do you think price parity stands going forward?
Yeah.
Sharon, would you take that?
I figured that was going to come to me. You know, God, I mean, that's what we talk about every day, price parity. It's still very much prevalent in the industry. We still need to address it. I think we see a lot of more people looking at the idea of private, I mean, this is what we saw with the European laws come in, you know, that, you know, make something a group or a user group and you can work around price parity. We see a lot more of that coming into the industry now. We also see a lot more of opaque pricing coming in, so people adding on a service, a flight, you know, even a transfer to almost make the price of the hotel more opaque in order to work around that. We do see that. I don't know where the industry is going to go on that. I mean, it's still very much caught up within the European law. I mean, there's been some rulings on it, but it's a difficult area.
Joe, got any thoughts on that?
Well, only to add to that, I mean, I'm a free marketeer at heart, and I also believe that people who own properties and try and manage their channels should have the freedom to manage their rates to whatever channel they see fit. I can see the benefit for users out there to not be just having to feel like they have to bounce to so many different places to get different prices. I mean, you know, Travelzoo is built around this closed user group that you're talking about, the subscribers who are going to get an offer, but typically, like you say, the hotel will package together things like upgrades or dinners or something to create a value package so that they're not then also annoying some of their other channels in terms of rate parity commitments that they've made there. But I mean, generally, I'm against it. We wait to see how the industry rules on it.
I think hotels also, I think some of the GMs that we talked to, you know, before there was a very much, you know, as you said, I only want to be distributed to certain channels. I am seeing that change in the industry as well, you know. I recently saw the CEO of World Hotels talk about this, and she was very much adamant that, you know, similar to what we were talking about there, is be bookable. You know, make sure you are available on the channel that the traveler wants to book on and not necessarily the channel you want to sell on. And that's a slight different or a slight shift in the industry we're beginning to see.
Okay, fine. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to move on. So let's thank Prue and Joel, sorry, Sharon and Joel very much indeed for great sessions. Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me, I'm thinking ahead a little bit too far there.
Just grab my water.
Yes. You got your phone, Joel? Good, okay. Joel, you remember put his phone down on the ground? I think it's an iPhone 5. Wanted someone to stamp on it so he'd get an iPhone 6, but that didn't happen. So we're going to, let me bring our next two speakers on stage. Let's bring Prue and Alec and ask them to then come and sit down. And we're moving on to the next session, which I've called Accelerating Innovation. And now we're sort of looking into the future at encouraging new businesses and new business as well. So Prue here, Prue Ashby is Head of Technology at London & Partners. She'll explain what London Partners is, but my understanding is it's a combination of the London Tourist Board and one or two other partners coming together to promote innovation in London. And sitting next to her is Alec Dent. Alec is Partnership Manager of BlaBlaCar, one of the disruptive businesses we're talking about, and maybe you might disrupt Uber. That'd be quite nice to do. So ladies and gentlemen, let's have our first presentation. Let's welcome Prue. Just say, let's run the video.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. I was very excited to actually walk through the whole area of Excel and see such a massive area dedicated to tech in travel. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to have a look yet, but it looks incredible. London & Partners. So as we just heard, we are the Mayor's official promotion organisation for London. And we actually promote London around the world to attract visitors, to attract events, to attract conventions and conferences, to attract students, and to attract businesses. So in the tourism side, we run the visitlondon.com website. Can you put up your hand if you've seen the visitlondon.com website? Good. So we run that. And then on the events side, we attract events and conferences from overseas into London. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had a conference called TechCrunch Disrupt. Now, if any of you into technology, you'll know it's a big conference from Silicon Valley, and they've been running in Silicon Valley for a few years. Last year, they were in Berlin, and we managed to woo them to London this year. And we hope they're going to stay in London. So that was really exciting. But there's many other conferences and events that we bring in. Other types of events, sporting events, the Rugby World Cup next year, the athletics, the hockey. We did have representatives on the Olympic bidding team. We created an event called Ride London. Did anyone in the room here do Ride London? It was a mass participation cycling event that closed down the roads in London and Surrey and had thousands of riders around those roads. And we've now actually been asked by a number of other cities that they would like to run a similar event, and they see that as a great event that they'd like to replicate. Students, we also attract students. In London and the South East, we now have 4 of the top 6 universities in the world. So we're very excited and we're attracting a lot of international students. However, my background is from the business side. So my background has been attracting businesses into London. I joined in 2007 and I joined the North America team. A number of these companies have already been discussed today, but I helped Twitter, Uber, Airbnb, Hotel Tonight, Eventbrite, Twilio, Box, and all these companies that I'm sure a lot of them you're very familiar with. I helped them set up in London and actually grow their businesses. We streamline the process for them so it can save them up to 6 months on what it would take to actually find the right connections, find the right office space, find the best law firm, find the right talent, and build the right relationships. So, I've been working with these technology companies for a few years. And back in 2010, we were in the depths of the recession. And one of the Prime Minister's advisors was on a flight and happened to be sat next to an entrepreneur who said, "Have you heard of the Silicon Roundabout?" And the Prime Minister's advisor said, "No, I haven't heard of this. Tell me more." And the entrepreneur said, "Well, we've got this roundabout that we've christened the Silicon Roundabout because we wanted to take the mick out of the Americans, and we've got a cluster of technology companies around this area of London." So as time progressed, they did some investigation and recognized there was something really going on in that part of London. And they decided to call the area Tech City. And they decided to promote the area around the world. And basically, London, about 5 years ago, if you'd said, "Do you know anything about tech in London?" most people would have said, "Tech in London? Nah, I don't really know anything about tech in London." Now, we are approached from global corporates, global cities around the world that want to replicate what we've achieved. So now, my slide, a thriving, innovative global commercial centre, the perfect place for technology. In London, you can start, grow, and globalise your business. We have the best tax breaks in the world for angel investors. So if you're a startup, you can get funding for your business. We have well over 80 co-working spaces, so you can get low-cost space and an energetic environment to build your business. Growing your business. So if you created your business somewhere else, but you want to grow it and scale it, London is the place to come. We have corporates. We have actually 40% of the world's largest companies have HQ functions in London. So you can do 6 meetings in a day with decision makers for your business. You can build your clients and accelerate the growth of your business. Finally, you can globalise your business from London. We speak English. We're on the Greenwich Mean Time line, so you can do business in Asia and in America in the same business day. We also have a very multicultural and diverse population in London where you can test your product and build your relationships with those markets. When we had the Olympics here, it was the first city ever where there was an existing community of supporters for every single team that competed in the Olympics. So I truly believe you can start, grow, and globalise your business from London. I'm now going to show you a video of an overview of what is going on in tech in London.
London's always been an amazing marketplace, been an international melting pot.
We're more international than anyone. We've been a historic trading city for hundreds of years.
Because we've got great thinkers, great creative thinkers.
The starting point was much more about creativity and lots of different creative disciplines sort of falling together and focusing on technology as the output.
Have actually found such an incredible team in East London, and I think that they're some of the best in the world.
In terms of access to talent, access to markets, access to capital, there isn't a better place in Europe. And that's the opportunity for startups right now, is to think about a marketplace of 5 billion people and to use London as the springboard to reach those markets.
It's an amazingly vibrant place, and it's full of great talent, and it continually attracts great talent from all over the world. It really is an engine for innovation and for culture. There's a lot of really innovative companies that started and are founded here.
I can't think of anybody I've met in the world that wouldn't love the opportunities to spend time in London.
We've been very fortunate to be able to connect the cultural strengths we have with an amazing policy environment and a really strong ecosystem now to support high-growth technology companies.
turn the corner in London, you find something new, and that's always a great thing. And we're sort of discovering that with the people who come and want to use our technology, is that they've all got brilliant and just unique ideas.
We have a very well-established creative culture. We have some of the best creative universities and arts facilities in Europe, if not arguably the world.
London, through Tech City, is really starting to get this global cachet of being the place where interesting, exciting things happen, and we feed off that.
What we have here in London is very, very special. We lead in mobile. We lead in financial services.
We're immensely proud here at Framestore of our work on Gravity. It's a great British success story. It's wonderful to have won 7 Academy Awards and to have that recognition.
I think London is an adventure every day, and that's something that I find truly inspiring.
So how did we get from no technology or not known for technology a few years back to where we are today? Well, I think what has happened is the government has done 3 things. The government set up a team called the Tech City team, which I was a part of for a while. And they did 3 things, as shown on this slide. They listened to the entrepreneurs and adjusted policy and regulation to support the companies, bringing in things like lowering corporation tax, bringing in the tax relief for angel investors, bringing in R&D tax credits, entrepreneurs visa, and many other policy benefits. They also promoted the UK and the companies in it and attracted investors. So companies like Google that invested in a building called Campus, which is a place which you haven't been, I strongly recommend you go, which is just full of startups and has an amazing energy. And they fostered an environment conducive to the growth of technology firms and supporting events, initiatives to actually bring companies together. So what I wanted to do was just to finish off with 2 particular case studies, which I think are really exciting and illustrate what we've achieved. A few years back, Transport for London released a lot of transport data around bus times and when buses were leaving and arriving at their destinations. And that actually inspired a lot of innovation. And one of the companies that actually made use of that data was called City Mapper. How many people in the room have got the app City Mapper? So I met the gentleman who founded it when he was sitting on his own in a co-working space, going through this data and massaging it and seeing what he could do with it. What he's now achieved is he's got nearly 30 people working for him. He's in nearly 15 cities around the world. He's got 10 million in investment. And what he did was he created an app that is really easy to use. So if you want to get from A to B in London, it will tell you in real time how to get there, how expensive it'll be, how many calories you'll use if you're cycling or walking, how much it'll cost, and how long it'll take in real time. And there's especially a button that you click that says, "Get me home." So if you're anywhere at the end of the night and you can't remember how to get home, you just press the button. The second company I wanted to talk about briefly just illustrates an example of how the serendipity happens in a tech cluster. I do a lot of work with Tech Hub, which is one of the leading co-working spaces for digital technology businesses. And one of the companies in Tech Hub was a company called What Now? And Elizabeth Varley, the founder of Tech Hub, introduced the company to me and said, you know what, I think they'd be really interesting to London and Partners and what you do. And I sort of passed them on, really, just thinking, well, yeah, that seems interesting, and passed it on to our digital team. Anyway, following from that, they are now the official London travel guide. And what they allow you to do is actually formulate a routing and your plans for the day, But then if you're offline, so you're not in Wi-Fi or you haven't got access to the internet, you can still carry on using it and it'll still update you. So it also saves you on roaming charges as well. So it's great for visitors to a new city. Finally, I just wanted to close on this slide, showing now that our tech cluster has developed, we have now actually got depths within our tech cluster of subsectors forming. So some of them are shown up here: fashion technology, health tech, ad tech, so technology for advertising, media, communications, fintech, we're actually leading the world in technology for financial services, digital media, animation, games, EdTech, technology for education. But we're also actually wanting to focus on travel tech. And London & Partners is creating a travel tech lab, which will become a focal point for technology companies related to travel, tourism, hospitality, and events. We are creating it in our own office, so we're undergoing a big refurb right now, which is not the most fun time to be in the office. And we will have an incubator with the companies in there, and then they will be able to engage with the corporates that are our partners or that we come across. Because what you've got is you've got the startups that want to scale their businesses, and you've got the corporates that want to innovate. And what we want to do is bring those all together. On that note, I'd like to close off on what we're doing in tech in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prue. Fascinating stuff. Clearly doing a good job. And I thought it would be great to hear from a new startup innovative business. It sounds wonderful the way Prue describes it, but it's not so easy starting a new business. Let's welcome Alec, who's going to tell us all about it.
Thank you, Paul, for that introduction. So today I wanted to talk to you about peer-to-peer and travel. We all know that peer-to-peer has had a big impact on digital goods, but is it relevant to travel? Obviously, I'm going to say yes. So BlaBlaCar, for those of you who don't know us, actually, I'd just be interested to know how many of you have heard of BlaBlaCar before? Okay, so maybe a quarter. So for those of you who don't know us, we are an app and a website, and we connect drivers who have empty seats in their cars with passengers who want to travel the same way so that they can share the cost of a journey. And what we're doing is we're building an intercity transport network based on the empty seats in people's cars. So first of all, I'd just like to talk about the current characteristics of intercity travel. We define intercity travel as travel over distances of anywhere between 100 and 800 kilometers. And it might surprise you to know that actually the vast majority of that travel happens by car, by private car. So what that means is there's a huge amount of waste going on because cars are not economic in the way we use them. So at the moment in Europe, average occupancy in cars is just 1.7 people. That's an occupancy rate of around 33% if we imagine that each car has 5 seats. You'd never see an airline satisfied with an occupancy rate that low. So we ask the question, why should we as a society be satisfied with so many cars going around with so few people in them? So actually, the biggest untapped seat inventory is not in trains, it's not in buses, it's not in airlines, as might be conventional to think. It's in cars that already are going around our roads. What that leaves is a massive potential to make use of those seats, and that is what we aim to do at BlaBlaCar. Okay, so that's nice in theory, but let's look at a historical example of a very similar solution to the problem I've just described, and that is hitchhiking. Now, hitchhiking is not popular today, so clearly something went wrong somewhere down the line. So I just want you to take 2 seconds to, in your heads, paint a picture of what comes to mind when the word hitchhiking is brought up. I'm then going to show you 2 different sets of images. So there's 2 images in each set, okay? And at the end, I'm going to ask you to tell me, show of hands, which set of image most resembles that picture that you've painted in your head. Okay, so here's set 1. Okay. Set 2 coming up. Okay, so how many of you thought that your picture most resembles set 2? And what about set 1? Okay, that's good news. Otherwise, I was finished. Great, so we identified 3 problems with hitchhiking. Firstly, you didn't know who you were going to travel with. Secondly, drivers were not paid, so there's not a big incentive for drivers to take part. And lastly, it wasn't organized ahead of time. So you had to stand beside the road, you weren't sure you were going to find your driver, and it was a hassle. It wasn't reliable. And so that's exactly what we built into the BlaBlaCar product, the app and website. You do know who you're traveling with because all members have a profile where there is lots of information about them. You organize it ahead of time. It's like a travel search engine, so you put in your departure, your destination, and you get a list of rides available. And drivers are paid. They're paid a contribution towards their fuel costs. So I'll just give you a really simple, concrete example. Imagine Tim, who's on the left there, and he's a driver, and he's going up. So he's on the left because we're in the UK, and for those of you coming from abroad, that's normal. He's a driver. He's going up to Manchester to visit his parents this weekend. That journey would cost him about £45 in fuel, depreciation, tax, insurance, and lots of associated costs. If he offers his ride on BlaBlaCar and takes 3 passengers with him, each passenger contributes on average £15 for that journey. It means that he can travel for free. For the passengers, that journey is costing them on average 75% less than the cost of a train. And actually, £15 is probably 10% of the cost of a last-minute train. So it's really a win-win situation. Okay, so I told you, we had a bit of a look at hitchhiking. We saw there were some problems there. The perception from you, the audience, of hitchhiking was not good. But we identified 3 problems, and we've gone and solved those problems through the product. So we've got something different now, and that is ride sharing. So I wanted to show you some pictures of what ride sharing really is like, so you get an idea and you realize what actually happens. So these are pictures from our members. Our members often send us pictures because they sort of like to know who's helped them meet these great people that they've had a great journey with. So in these pictures, the people didn't actually know each other, so it's quite surprising to see such kind of friendly pictures being sent in. You'll note that the passenger here has a dog on his lap, so on BlaBlaCar, you actually state on your profile your preferences. For example, are you happy to take dogs with you in the car? Are you happy to listen to music? And are you happy to accept smokers in your car? And this is the last one. This was actually me this summer. I happened to meet some Taiwanese students who were going up to Oxford, and I was able to give them loads of tips because I've lived there. So it was great. Okay, so one thing I've yet to mention is trust, because trust is very important for us, because how can we expect people to travel with each other if they can't trust the information that's on the website? So at BlaBlaCar, we've developed a framework that we call the DREAMS framework. So DREAMS is an acronym for the 6 pillars of trust that we deem necessary in order to create trust in an online peer-to-peer network or marketplace. Essentially, the information that's present in the marketplace needs to have these 6 characteristics. So the first one is that information needs to be declared. Members need to declare information about themselves. For example, we mentioned the pet feature. There's also a blah blah feature, which is actually where our name comes from. So members will say, on the scale of blah, I don't talk very much, blah blah depends on my mood, and blah blah blah, I won't shut up, how much they like to talk in the car. Because it's important to have a sense of who you're going to travel with before the journey. Secondly, information is rated. So on BlaBlaCar, people spend on average 2 to 3 hours together in the car because the average journey distance is actually 200 miles. So they have a lot of information that they can go on to rate a driver or a passenger. And we now have, our top drivers have more than 500 ratings, and it's extremely reassuring for a passenger to see all of the previous members of BlaBlaCar who've been able to rate that driver positively. And it's also important to note that the driving skills are rated anonymously, so there's no incentive to not rate as you deem fit. Information also needs to be engaged. Now, what that is essentially is we need to see a commitment from both parties to actually do that journey. So, for example, as a passenger, if I book the journey and pay beforehand, that's a real commitment that, yeah, I am coming. If I just say, sure, yeah, I'll turn up, but I haven't paid, it's a little bit less of a commitment. So that's why there's an online booking system. Information is also activity-based. So a driver, let's say a host on Airbnb, isn't necessarily going to be a great driver on BlaBlaCar. So their positive ratings are only relative to the activity that, that they've been based on. Similarly, a great seller on eBay isn't necessarily a great host on Airbnb. Information is moderated. Now, that's super important, but it's also very resource intensive. Essentially, we have a team of about 40 people in a company of, currently we're about 170, 180, who moderate all of the content on the website. Now, what that means is that they're ensuring that the content remains in the right spirit of the community, which is really important. It means that when people come to BlaBlaCar, they know what they're there for, they know what they're trying to find. There aren't any sort of side uses that confuse the usage. Finally, information is social. So you're much more likely to want to travel with someone if, like you, they've got friends on Facebook, they've got connections on LinkedIn, etc. So that's the Dreams framework. It didn't happen overnight for us. It took us a number of years to actually get that right. So here you can see the number of passengers transported by BlaBlaCar and compare it to when we implemented each feature of the Dreams framework. So in 2008, information was declared, it was activity-based, it was moderated, but growth was slow. 2010, the ratings came in, and it was only in 2012 that we had the full Dreams profiles, and that's when the activity really picked up. So now I want to give you an idea of how much trust it is actually possible to create in a peer-to-peer marketplace. We asked our members, out of 5, how much do you trust each of these different groups? So not surprisingly, strangers came lowest, and also not surprisingly, friends and family were at the top. We then asked them, okay, so you as a BlaBlaCar member, how much do you trust another BlaBlaCar member that has a full Dreams profile? And the answer to that question was an average of 4.2. So that's really fantastic, because what it means is that we've created enough trust that people in the BlaBlaCar community trust each other more than they would a colleague or a Facebook contact. Now, I want to show you what that means in practice. Obviously, it means that people are willing to travel together, but I'll give you a bit of a glimpse on two other things that happen thanks to this trust. So firstly, we get some really fantastic ratings being left for, between members, because as we've said, if the trust is greater than it is between you and a colleague, you can expect the interaction to be just as rich. So here, there's a rating for Max where it says he's a keen recruit to BlaBlaCar. So really a sense of community there. The second rating is for Michelle, and it says there, she shared some biscuits with us all and was fun to have on board. Again, how many times have you sat on a train or a bus and had your neighbor nudge you and offer some Jaffa cakes? Probably never, but that's just sort of common practice during these sorts of journeys on BlaBlaCar. The second thing is that clearly it's a new activity, it's a new form of behavior, and it requires education. New members arrive and they need to be led through the process. Now, we have a member relations team, as mentioned, that helps with that, but then we thought it's not hugely scalable for us. We thought, how can we improve this? We know that we have lots of members who use it very regularly and who love being part of the community and love the fact that they're building up ratings, that they go up our experience level. For example, the top experience level is an ambassador. And we thought, why not use those guys to help us? So we're just testing at the moment, but early sort of tests are really promising. A feature where we have some of our most experienced members ready for a live chat with any member that has a question. So what that means is that if I want to book a trip, I've got that page up, and I've got some questions, I can simply go into the chat and talk to a member, not someone that we're employing, not someone that we're paying. So that means that we're making it so that they can help each other. And what's surprising is that so they're not paid, and the reason we find that they do this is that they love being recognized as someone who is experienced within the community, and there's a sense of sort of addiction to the gratification that they get from helping other members. So that's really fantastic and hugely scalable for us. Okay, so now that we've looked at the problems associated with hitchhiking and how we've solved those, and I've explained a little bit about trust and the importance of trust, I want to give you a bit of insight into how things are going and a few numbers. So firstly, I'm sure that nearly all of you have heard of Airbnb, which is fast disrupting or adding to, depending on your view, the hotel industry. And this is a Google Trends graph that shows you the number of searches for Airbnb that are used as a proxy for awareness. As you can see, we're probably only about 12 months behind Airbnb in terms of awareness. So what that means is that we're on the right path to disrupt, or my view is to add to and make more available the travel within the travel industry. And what that means in practice is that we're now starting to be considered as a real transport network, and we have people coming to us saying we'd like to integrate BlaBlaCar so that our users can book a BlaBlaCar just like they book a bus ticket on these travel comparison websites. And it's not just ground transport, it's also longer distance transport. As I said, it's anywhere between 100 and 800 kilometers. Well, that means that we can provide a solution for people who can't afford a last-minute domestic flight, for example. In terms of members, we now have 10 million members as of September this year. So we've seen some exponential growth in the last few years where we're really doubling our community every year. But as we always say, that sign-ups and members is vanity, and what is sanity is usage. So in terms of usage, we now have 2 million people travel with BlaBlaCar every month as either a driver or as a passenger. And to give you a sense of comparison, the Eurostar currently transport about 950,000 people a month. So we're transporting more than twice as many people as the Eurostar. And why that's an interesting comparison is that if you think about the Eurostar, it took years of planning, it took billions of investment to get to that stage. What we've done is we've used an existing asset that's just been wasted and created a transport network that's currently transporting twice as many people as the Eurostar. So what next for us? We recently received a round of investment for $100 million from Index Ventures. And the aim of that, and what we're going to concentrate on in the next few years, is to take BlaBlaCar as a European phenomenon, what it is now. We're currently in 13 countries, mostly across Europe, and make it into a global phenomenon. We've been really encouraged by, for example, our launch in Russia recently, where we realized that on top of being cheaper than alternative transport methods, we can, in slightly developing countries, also be quicker if there isn't an adequate train line. We can be more comfortable, and we can also sometimes be the only way to get from A to B. So that's really encouraging and points to some countries that have a really large number of people and where we could really provide a useful service. So that's it for me. I hope I've provided you a useful insight into what we're up to, and I hope you're as excited as I am to see it move forwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Alec.
You need that?
Yeah, I'll take that. Have a seat. Fascinating stuff, Alec. Thank you very much indeed. And Prue as well, of course. Who'd like to ask a question? Prue, let me start with you. I'll ask a question. It's great to see London being so proactive in what you're doing. And you talked about your travel tech lab incubator, didn't you? Where you're going to allow innovative businesses to take a little space in this redesigned area in your beautiful offices overlooking the Tower of London. But how will you, and there's going to be huge demand, Prue, how will you actually judge the worth of a new startup business to actually take one of those spaces when compared to all the others who are no doubt going to be applying?
That's a very good question. And actually, we are expecting companies not only born and bred in London or the UK, but also from overseas to want to be a part of it. We will have, obviously, limited physical spaces, and we'll have a panel of sort of experts that will assess each application. But I think we will probably have some kind of membership as well, which will broaden it out so that everyone can access events and activities that are actually going on.
Okay, but presumably there'll be some businesses that you just need to turn down. Will you have a panel to make that judgment, or?
Yeah, so there'll be a panel of experts representing the specific nuances of the sector, and yeah, they will assess those companies.
Okay.
I mean, the great benefits is that we have a big partner network, London and Partners, so we partner with the major hotels, the major professional conference organisers, the major sort of activities and event spaces in London. And so the companies will benefit from those relationships with those partners that we have.
Okay, okay. Who would like to ask a question? Yes, gentleman over there again. Lovely. And just, if you don't mind standing up, just announcing yourself again, be lovely. Thank you very much.
My name is Sanjeev, Fairfest Media India. About BlaBlaCar, do you see any legal problems in the sense that it becomes a commercial transaction, you know? For example, I can see in my country, it would be very difficult to charge on a private passenger vehicle, you know. So do you see, or have you faced in the past any problems like this or any questions like this?
So I can't comment specifically on India. Where we're actually quite well placed is that drivers are just covering their costs. They're not making a profit. And so, for example, in the UK, the Association of British Insurers, who represent about 90% of insurers, vehicle insurers in the UK, state that so long as the driver doesn't make any profits, there's no issue there. So it's quite nice because actually when there's, I think we face maybe sometimes a perception that there might be some legal issues, but the reality is that there aren't any. In terms of fine details in new countries, there might be some obstacles to overcome, but I don't think that what we do doesn't bring up any kind of anger or unlike maybe some other disruptive companies. So it's good news on that front. But we have an education job, and it doesn't mean it's just plain sailing, but it's fine.
So Alex, some other disruptive companies are actually Uber, isn't it? Because Uber's doing something similar, but they're actually, their drivers are doing this for commercial gain, so they need to have different insurance. And I think London cabs are getting very upset about Uber, amongst others.
Yeah. So
do you actually see BlaBlaCar disrupting Uber?
No, because our average journey is 200 miles.
Okay.
Also, we are supply-led, which means what I mean by that is that the driver offers his ride, and it's up to passengers to contact the driver to share the journey. The driver's going there anyway. He's paying for that journey anyway. Uber is completely different because it's demand-led. Me as a passenger, I ask for my Uber, and I have to make sure that driver is not doing that journey otherwise, so he has to make money out of it, and on top of that, fully cover the cost of the journey. So the average journey distance is not going to be long. So they're two really very different things.
They are different business models, yes. Prue, we've talked a lot about disruptive businesses, and I mentioned Uber just now, which has upset a few London taxi drivers, I think. You're encouraging innovative businesses. Some of them will be disruptive. Some of them may be disrupting businesses that are already serving London very well indeed. And you might get complaints from existing businesses saying, why on earth are you putting us out of business when we do so much for London? Has that occurred at all, and how might you cope with it?
Well, when I was talking about the companies I've helped, I actually helped Uber and Airbnb, and those kind of companies actually set up in London, which involves, streamlining the process, helping them register their company, find office space, find the talent, and build their networks. It's interesting because Airbnb, how many people in the room have stayed at Airbnb? Yeah, so quite a few. They say that actually they're not necessarily hurting hotels, they're actually building or offering something different. And they're actually taking people to different parts of a city. So in other words, if I was staying in Airbnb, I might stay in a different suburb or different area, not necessarily where all the hotels are. So what I'm doing is I'm speaking to my host, I'm having a coffee in the local coffee shop, so I'm spending money in that local community. So Airbnb claim that the sort of wealth of the visitors is actually being spread out across the city to differing communities. Regards Uber, yes, I mean, Uber have actually been very disruptive, and you know, they actually, because the taxi drivers did do a big demonstration, that actually really helped Uber a lot in there.
That's right. If they're being demonstrated against, they must be good.
They must be good.
Yes.
I think that disruption invariably benefits the end consumer. So whether you look at technologies that have changed our lives in the past that have been disruptive, they have invariably improved the way we do things. And what Uber does is it means that when I get into one of an Uber car, I don't have to worry about having cash, I don't have to worry about my card, I'm on a contract, it's all paid for and done, and that's it. And so really, I think that improves my experience. The London cabs, some of them had card machines, but some of them don't. I think they need to, you know, look to sort of modernise their experience as well. They're iconic and they're amazing, but it's still about improving the customer experience into the future.
Okay, fine, thank you. I'd just like to now hand over to Peter Dennis, Chairman of Travel Technology Initiative, to sum up. But first of all, let's thank Prue and Alec very much indeed for 2 great presentations.